Welcome to Developing a Legal Research Strategy. Sometimes the hardest part of doing legal research is knowing exactly how to get started. The purpose of this course is to help you along with that process. My name is Timothy Gatton, and I'm the Head of Reference Services at Oklahoma City University Law Library. Developing a Legal Research Strategy is a required course for obtaining the Award of Accomplishment in Legal Research Skills. So for the overview, number one, always have a plan. Too many people approach legal research without having any plan of action, which can slow down the process and lead to frustration. Number two, keep notes. You should know where you've already looked and what you've found. This will help keep you on task and hopefully prevent you from reading the same case multiple times. Number three, know when to ask for help. This can be a tough one for a lot of people. There is no shame in asking for help or advice. Number four, have a backup plan. If your plan only includes using Westlaw Next, for example, you'll need a contingency plan in case Westlaw is not available to you. And number five, find a strategy that works for you. So regarding the plan, keep in mind there really isn't any one-size-fits-all magical formula. Strategies can vary depending on the task and on the individual. Your plan will not always be linear. Keep in mind this is a process. Sometimes you'll jump from one step to another and then back again. And make an outline that details what you know and another one that describes how you'll go about finding out the information that you don't know. So with the strategy and with the process, just remember there is no one-size-fits-all strategy. So with the process, you're given a legal situation or scenario. So first, you need to analyze and plan, and that involves identifying the facts, identifying the legal issues, and then planning your search strategy. Number two is the actual research itself. So with the research, you will find secondary sources as well as primary sources, read and evaluate those sources, and then update. And then finally, you'll apply the law. You'll also want to go ahead and create a schedule and budget. So how much time is available to you? That's something you'll have to consider. Do you have other work or school commitments at certain times or on certain days? Is there, for an example, a 2-hour break in between classes where you could work on your research? Number two, what are the deadlines? Find out exactly when this needs to be completed. If there's a short turnaround, your strategy may be different than if you have a more distant deadline. And number three, what resources will you have? Will you have to use the print? Only Westlaw? Will you be limited to only free internet resources? Notes and records. You're going to need a system for taking notes that works for you. Some people are fine with using online folders, for example. Others do better with notebooks or note cards. Take notes on your sources as you go along. This saves a lot of time later on. Pay attention to which terms were useful and which terms were not. Try not to duplicate your efforts. Nothing is more frustrating than spending time reading through a case or statute only to realize after about 30 minutes that you've already read that one. And write down full citation information as you go along so you don't have to backtrack for that information. Again, this will save you time at the end of the process. So as I stated before, some people prefer note cards. I know a lot of law students rely on note cards when they're studying for finals. It's the same for when you're developing your legal research strategy. So some people do prefer writing the information on note cards and then organizing it that way. For others, they prefer notebooks, just writing all the information in a notebook. For others, printing up the materials and then putting them in a 3-ring binder, for example, is the method that they prefer. Still others will just simply use a Word document where they copy and paste their sources over to the Word document. There's also case management software. So there are tools like Zotero, RefWorks, and EndNotes. And keep in mind folders on databases like Westlaw Next. So with Zotero, it's at zotero.org. It's free to download and allows the user to collect, organize, cite, and share sources. I personally have Zotero on my computer here at work, and I do find that easy to go ahead and collect my sites and put them in one easy to access source. So for those of you who are comfortable with doing online resources and plan on doing most of your research online, I think Zotero would be an excellent option. RefWorks is another online management tool, although it is not free to use, but there are some places that do offer a RefWorks subscription. There's also EndNote. EndNote is a Thomson Reuters project like Westlaw Next. Again, it is not free, but if you're working at a firm that does use EndNote, that can be a really good resource for putting your research on there. So you'll want to know when to ask for help. And as law students, I know a lot of you are, well, most of you, type A personalities. You know you can do it, you're smart, and you just don't want to ask for help. But keep in mind, asking for help can be essential when you're starting a project. If you get stuck and can't find what you're looking for, ask someone like a librarian or attorney. And keep in mind, there's not always an answer for everything. And that's really easy to forget sometimes. Because as law students or attorneys, we're thinking, well, there has to be a case about this. And that's not always the case. You'll also want to have a backup plan, so keep alternatives in mind. Think of other databases or resources. For example, if you'd plan on using Westlaw Next for the bulk of your research and then find out you can't use it, you'll need to have other sources in mind to come up with that information. In a sample research strategy, again, keep in mind that the strategy isn't necessarily linear, and you might go from step 1 to step 4 to step 2 to step 1 to step 3 to step 1 to step 4, for example. So step 1 is factual analysis. So you'll want to answer who, what, where, when, why. That is the journalistic approach. What do you already know and what do you still need to find out? There's also the TARP approach, and that's things, action, relief, persons. So for things, you'd be looking for descriptive words for legal and factual issues, subject headings, legal terms of art. For action, you'd be looking for possible causes of action or defenses. You'll also be looking to see what kind of relief is being sought. Also, persons, so you'd be looking for the legal entities, not the actual names. So here we have a fact pattern that was in the news earlier this summer. A United Airlines flight to New York from Houston was forced to make an emergency stop in Memphis when an unruly passenger got into a physical skirmish with the crew, officials said on Monday. Flight 1435 was en route from Houston's Bush Intercontinental Airport to New York's LaGuardia Airport on Saturday evening when a disruptive passenger sat in a jump seat used by the crew and strapped himself in, a Transportation Security Administration official said. The man refused to return to his own seat and got into a verbal and physical altercation with flight attendants, the official said. The disruption forced the plane to land at Memphis International Airport, where the passenger was arrested, the FBI in Memphis said. It was unclear what charges he would face. At no point did the passenger attempt to rush the cockpit or interfere with the piloting of the plane, FBI and TSA officials said. The flight resumed its journey, landing at Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey early on Sunday due to hour restrictions for takeoff and landing at LaGuardia. So if we look at the factual analysis, who? We're looking at passenger, flight crew, FBI, TSA, the airline. As far as what, we're looking at federal aviation rules violated, assault, possible battery. As far as where, well, the flight took off in Texas, had to land in Tennessee. There's also general airspace. As far as when, it was May or June of 2014. And then the why, we're looking at, there may be Patriot Act issues as well as FAA violations, just basic air safety. So step 2, you'll want to generate a research vocabulary. Think of terms and phrases that you can use in your searches from the fact pattern. So you'll want to look at synonyms, maybe some antonyms, broad terms, narrow terms, related terms. You can find these words in a legal dictionary, legal thesaurus, or a words and phrases volume. An example would be, let's say you were given a fact pattern that uses the word attorney. So if that's the case, yes, you'll want to look up the word attorney as far as one of your keywords, but you might also want to look at lawyer, counselor, or barrister, for example. So research vocabulary based on the news item we read. Some of the words that I just came up with: assault, battery, airline, FAA, TSA, FBI, airplane, security, regulations, plane, jump seat, flight attendant, passenger, and safety. And that's just an example. I'm sure there are many, many more words that you could use for your research vocabulary. Step 3, collect background information. Use your research vocabulary as an index and use that to search for terms using online as well as print resources where available. So sources would be legal encyclopedias, law review articles, treatises, ALRs, and practice materials. Keep in mind that these are all secondary sources. Secondary sources are statements about the law but not the law itself. It's never binding or mandatory but can be persuasive. Secondary sources are great for helping you increase the understanding of an area of law and are an outstanding place to start one's research. So here we have a Westlaw Next example of secondary sources. I ran an advanced search on assault and battery and airline and passenger and security, and I came up with 1,337 results. So this would be excellent background information on this particular issue. Step 4, identify and analyze the issues of your case. You'll want to distinguish the facts from the issues. So here, the facts of our fact pattern: the passenger refused to vacate the jump seat, and there was a physical skirmish with the crew. So our issues would include violation of FAA policies, violation of other statutes, possible assault, battery, as well as security issues. Step 5, search for authority. So you're going to look for primary authority first. And primary authority is the law itself. So we're talking statutes, regulations, and cases. It's always mandatory in disputes where it governs, and it's binding on people and entities in that jurisdiction. So is there a statute on point? So for sources on that, you would look to statutes at large, United States Code Congressional Administrative News, United States Code Annotated, United States Code Service. And if you're researching, for instance, an Oklahoma issue, you'd want to check the Oklahoma Statutes Annotated. The annotated statutes can be an excellent starting point because the annotations after the statute will lead you to other cases, other secondary authority, other primary authority. So if there is a statute on point, see if there are any administrative regulations. So sources for that would include the Code of Federal Regulations, the Federal Register, the Oklahoma Administrative Code, as well as the Oklahoma Register if you're researching Oklahoma law. If there are no annotations to the statutes on point, see if there's any information in a legislative history. So sources for that would include Hein Online, UScan, and ProQuest Congressional. And then identify cases on point. And that's where West Digest System and Westlaw Next can really come in handy. Also, Lexis Advance, and the cases that you might have identified through using any annotated statutes. So here I ran an advanced search on assault and battery and airline and passenger and security. So for the overview, you can see for cases, there were 188 cases, 532 statutes that pulled up with that search criteria, 45 administrative decisions and guidance. So there are a lot of primary authority that is listed that may be pertinent for your research purposes. Step 6 is to reevaluate and reanalyze the issues. There may be a new issue you found while doing your research. And go back and see if you may have missed something once you've become more familiar with that area of the law. So here we have an entry from the CCH Aviation Law Reporter. So this is a case where it states former Section 1111, now Section 44902 of the FAA, was originally enacted by Congress in 1961. This provision authorizes an airline to refuse to transport a passenger or property the carrier decides is or might be inimical to safety. Congress originally enacted this provision to help combat an air piracy problem. However, Section 44902 of the FAA is not, as Ms. Rubin suggests, reserved strictly for would-be terrorists and hijackers. Airlines have also invoked their discretion under the statute, as they have under common law, to exclude passengers in any number of circumstances. On the other hand, although the discretion given an airline under this provision to refuse to transport a passenger for safety reasons is decidedly expansive, it is not unfettered. If an airline's refusal of transportation is arbitrary or capricious, its refusal can give way to a claim by the offended passenger for damages. Stated another way, the decision to accept or refuse transport to a passenger based on considerations of safety and security lies exclusively with the air carrier, and if such discretion is exercised in good faith and for a rational reason, it will be upheld. So this is a good example of, we took this particular case. There are some extra keywords that I hadn't considered, like carrier. So I know that maybe common carrier might be a good keyword for that. Air piracy, safety reasons. So there's just some good information here that can help you when you're reanalyzing the issue. It's also leading us directly to a statute that's on point. So we have an actual provision enacted by Congress that deals with airlines refusing to transport a passenger. Step 7. You'll want to update and verify the authority with Shepard's or Keysight. Because you want to make sure that everything you found is still good law. So here we have an example of Keysight from Westlaw Next with American Airlines Inc. v. Wolins from 1995. And with this one, we see a yellow flag, which means caution. And you'll want to see, like with the treatment, it's basically other cases have declined to extend that particular decision. But the decision has not been overruled. So a lot of people wonder, well, when exactly do I stop? Well, if you keep coming across the same material and nothing new and relevant is showing up, then you've probably reached the end of the line. So the assignment is to describe your research strategy for the news item on the next slide. And remember the steps. Although keep in mind, you can go ahead and modify those or switch the order around depending on your situation. So number 1, factual analysis. Number 2, generate a research vocabulary. 3, collect background information. 4, identify and analyze the issues of your case. 5, search for authority. 6, reevaluate and reanalyze the issues. And 7, update and verify. So this particular news item was from the beginning of the summer involving radio legend Casey Kasem. And in this news item, says the family dispute between Casey Kasem's wife and kids took a bizarre turn on Sunday, according to a report by NBC News. Carrie Kasem, the radio legend's daughter, brought an ambulance to Kasem's home in order to transport him to the hospital. Paramedics were refused entry. And in an apparent act of defiance, Kasem's wife Jean came outside and threw a pound of raw hamburger meat at Carrie. Despite the meat missile, the ambulance team were eventually able to wheel Kasem out of the home after the incident. Jean Kasem defended the meat attack in an interview with NBC News. In the name of King David, I threw a piece of raw meat into the street in exchange for my husband to the wild rabid dogs, Kasem said. Kasem's kids have battled with Jean over custody of their father over the past several months. The radio legend is suffering from dementia and went missing for several days before being found with Jean in Washington State. A Washington state judge ruled last week that Carrie was allowed to see her father for 1 hour every day beginning Friday evening. So with that fact pattern, again, just to recap, factual analysis, what are the facts of that case, the who, what, where, when, why. You'll want to generate a research vocabulary. So think of those synonyms and other legal terms of art that you can use for your keywords. Collect your background information through secondary sources. Identify and analyze the issues. Search for that primary authority. Then reevaluate and reanalyze the issues. And then update and verify using Shepard's or Keysight. So work on this and then submit your exercise through the Twin Dropbox. Thank you.